Yeah, buddy. This is the GPD Win Mini. And I'm pleased to report we finally get to see the return of the king. This is now a proper successor to the original GPD Win 2, which had a long reign from 2017 to 2020 as the best handheld gaming PC the world had ever seen or ever had, because it was the only thing that really existed. But it still was amazing for its time. Even with its myriad of problems, it was a fantastic device, and GPD has solved pretty much all of them in this latest version. So we're going to be talking about that as we go through this updated review. Now, for those that may not be aware, I've already previously reviewed the GPD Win Mini a few months ago as a pre-production model. This had a metal mid-shell. I was not able to really recommend it just because it radiated heat outward, and in 30 minutes, even at playing at 13 watt, I just wasn't able to really enjoy playing on the device at all. It was just something that was popping up in my mind. As I was using it, I noticed that my thumbs were hot and I was no longer enjoying the game. So it's not something that I could really recommend. And I am very pleased to report that GPD has solved this problem completely. So whatever blend of plastic and glass fiber that they're using to insulate that heat is doing such a good job. And we're going to be looking at that a lot in this particular video. I have a lot of thermal visuals that we're going to be talking you through so you can see everything and I can properly convey to you what that actually means. But we're also going to be taking a look at a really long time for benching the internal APU versus the metal one. Again, for people that may not have seen that other video, let's quickly go over the specs that are available on the GPD Win Mini. There are two different APUs that GPD includes with it. There is the 7840U or the 7640U. The difference between those two largely is going to be that the 7640U is definitely not going to be as performant per watt as the 7840U. I don't have a 7640U myself, but some of the tests that I've seen before were around a 10 to 20% performance difference per watt. So take that as you will. If you don't mind that that's going to be the case, especially it's going to be different per game, then you can get that because it's going to be the cheaper model. But if you want the better model, you're going to have to go for the 7840U, which is also the only model that you're going to be able to get to 32 gigs of RAM. The other part that's absolutely worth mentioning here is that the original GPD Win 2's keyboard was actually a fantastic thumb typing keyboard, and the GPD Win Mini improves upon that in many ways. Not only are the keys slightly larger, making them easier to hit, but they also have a backlit display now, something that a lot of people wanted for the original GPD Win 2, and now we have that here. So many things that GPD has improved over the years have made it into the GPD Win Mini that this is everything everyone always wanted out of the GPD Win 2, and they've done such a fantastic job. The next thing we have to talk about is obviously the amazing heatsink fan solutions that GPD produces. Ever since the GPD Win 3, they've been really knocking it out of the park. The GPD Win 4 especially was such a fantastic heatsink on such a small device, and that continues to be the case for the GPD Win Mini. Now, by default, it's going to be capped at 20 watt. You can change that in the BIOS if you want to push it higher. Now, I wouldn't recommend going over 20 watt, especially because we don't have such a large battery here. We only have a 44 watt hour battery. Typically, depending on the game you're going to play, at a 15 watt TDP, if you're pushing that to load, you're going to be anywhere from 24 to 25 watt total system power, meaning that you're going to get around 2 hours of battery life if you have a game that's pushing that all the time. So let's say, for instance, you have Doom Eternal running and you're playing that game at 15 watt, you could anticipate that you would likely get around 2 hours of battery life. Now, if you put the game at all low settings and you can actually hit with internal graphics 120 FPS, which is pretty amazing, but you do have to do 720p and then do scaling up to that. So you're going to be running at sub resolutions up 720p and using low settings thereafter. So if you wanted to hit 60 FPS, you can do that at 1080p with nightmare settings, ultra quality settings. So you can make the game look absolutely fantastic at 60 FPS, or you can do sub resolutions to hit 120 FPS. That's going to be up to you. Honestly, it looks really good in either situation, so that's going to be a subjective thing for you to decide. Going on, we also have what is the biggest thing that is, I'm so glad that is on these devices now, and if you can see right there, this is the Oculink port. Now, this is a better extension because what we're doing is we're actually taking PCI lanes off of the 7840U or the 7640U and extending that over a cable. What you can do is you can take GPD's G1, this is their eGPU solution. Not only does it support Oculink and Thunderbolt, you can see both of those right on the front of this GPD G1 as well. You could do either or. Oculink is much, much better than Thunderbolt. I've done reviews on that in the past, so if you wanted to have a solution, Oculink is definitely the way to go. And that is something that GPD has a complete suite that you can buy everything for. For instance, you can play Lies of P at 1080p, hitting 120 FPS with good quality settings, and that'll be consistent all the way through. That is a really cool feature that GPD uses on all of their new products. So the GPD Win Max 2, the GPD Win 4, and the GPD Win Mini. These three devices all support Oculink, and GPD makes a device that has Oculink out. So if you wanted an easy solution for Oculink, GPD has you covered. Obviously, you can buy third-party stuff and then use whatever you want. For me, I use a 4090, so I have used an NVIDIA 4090. Right now, I'm recording on a GPD Win Max 2 using a 4090, so that's my basic desktop replacement. And I take my GPD Win Max 2 with me everywhere. But now the GPD Win Mini, so fantastic. Continue along the specs, we do have the Hall-based analog sticks that are also on the GPD Win Max 2. So for anyone that has used the GPD Win Max 2 Hall sticks, you will have a pretty similar idea. GPD has also included software that you can now adjust the dead zone on there. So you can actually adjust that to something that's a little bit more to your liking. They're actually updating that even more. So there's some real cool stuff that GPD is doing there. And I'm glad that they've been listening to the community. So really good stuff there. The micro SD card slot is only UHS 1. So for the most part, you're going to get most of the speed. But for newer cards that are UHS 2, you're not going to be able to pull that speed. Additionally, it has a USB 4 port. So even if you weren't sold on Oculink, Oculink is way better. But let's say you had an eGPU solution that only used Thunderbolt. You could actually just use that and plug that right into the GPD Win Mini now without having to buy anything else, and that would work as well. So that is another feature on the GPD Win Mini itself. There are a few different SSD solutions storage solutions that GPD sells right out of the gate. So it starts at 512 gig and goes up to 2 terabyte. The 2 terabyte model is a Western Digital SSD. So keep that in mind. Obviously, 2230 drives have dropped in price drastically since the SteamDeck has come out. So there are a lot of options that are very, very affordable now. Making a comeback is those front-firing speakers. Now, those were on the GPD Win 2 as well, but I'm glad that they remain on the front of the device instead of being downward firing or upward firing. I'm very glad they are where they are. They aren't as loud as the GPD Win 2s were. However, they work fine. Now, the GPD does have a way to get DTS licensed and running on the GPD Win Mini, so if that was something that you cared about, that'll work through the front-firing speakers, but they sound fine enough. Well, we already talked about this, but this does have a 44 watt-hour battery. Now, why that's impressive is that that's actually 10% larger battery capacity than the original SteamDeck. Obviously, with the latest SteamDeck, the SteamDeck OLED, we have a 50 watt-hour battery, so that is no longer comparison. SteamDeck OLED now has a large capacity battery. However, the SteamDeck OLED is gigantic compared to the GPD Win Mini. Let me just show you. So just so you can see the absolute massive difference between the SteamDeck versus the GPD Win Mini. The GPD Win Mini is obviously the only PC gaming handheld that you can put into your pocket, your front pocket. You don't even have to really consider anything. You just put it into your front pocket. Now, that's something that I showed earlier on, and you can't see it was off camera, but I mean, literally it's coming in and out of my pocket, and you just be able to easily put it away. So that's something that none of the other PC gaming handhelds could do while retaining such a large battery capacity. The last part that we can talk about specs are the grips themselves. Now, this is something that I just really can't recommend. I'm not a big fan of grips. I'm not a big grip fan. Generally, it should be something that's already on there, like how the Steam Deck's grips are already on the controller, and it feels great. But I don't like having something that is like an accessory that you're going to be carrying around or putting on, just because when you think about what you're going to be doing, if you're going to be taking those grips on and off, you're going to kill the portability on the device itself. It just becomes something that is far larger and kind of removes the entire purpose of how portable the GPD Win Mini is. Additionally, I don't think that it's all that uncomfortable to use the GPD Win Mini without grips. So for me, the grips aren't a big deal at all, but for people that like grips, I'm not going to try to change your opinion. It's something you like, it's something you need for whatever reason, they're there for you. Okay, so that was the specs, trying to give as much flavor as I possibly could, going through them for you guys. We're going to first go onto the thermal scans of this device just to kind of clarify to you how GPD has solved this problem. So we're going to do that first. Then we're going to talk about the thermal graph of the APU itself. We'll briefly touch on 15 watt benchmarks on the device itself, because that's generally where you're going to be running the device, between 13 and 15 watt. 15 watt is more than fine, and typically, again, if you're pushing it to max load, you're going to be getting around 2 hours of battery life. So that's really just like the minimum battery life that is acceptable, really. 2 hours is a fine enough time. It's not fantastic, but it's good enough for modern games. Now, obviously, you can get much, much better battery life if you're going to run games that don't require as much performance. They don't have that much demands on the APU themselves. When you speak of like emulation and stuff, you're going to be able to get up to 8 hours, no problem. So anywhere from 2 to 8 hours is what you should anticipate for battery life. But first, let's get to the thermal part of this review. Okay, so here is the difference between the GPD Win Mini plastic versus the GPD Win that has the metal mid-shell. Now, the bottom here is actually still plastic, but you can see that we are seeing some heat down here. So this is about 38 degrees Celsius, and this is 31 degrees Celsius. So a very large difference here. All right, so here we have the front of the GPD Win Minis. Now I have them propped up a little bit so that I get proper airflow. These have been running a 15-watt test on both of them for over an hour now. I'll actually show you the thermal results in just a moment from the T-die itself. Left side, again, is plastic. Right side is metal. And you can see on the left-hand side with the plastic version how little heat is being transferred along the edges, especially where we're holding the device. You're not going to feel it anywhere near what you're going to feel on the metal mid-shell, where it transfers that heat pretty much everywhere and broadcasts that heat all over. So if we look at the edge, you can see that this is around 47 degrees Celsius. Now, I want to point out here that when you're looking at these temps, that it's not going to be 100% accurate. It's going to be off by like 3 degrees, but it's going to be off 3 degrees for both of these tests, right? So we're going to still be off in the same amount. And you can see how drastic of a temperature difference that actually is. The other part that I want to talk about here, and you can see my hand. So if we take a look at my hand, you can see that if we just take a look at my finger right here, you can see that it's nothing there. I want you to show you a quick little test. So I'm going to go to the hottest point that we have right here. So this is 60 degrees Celsius from the scan, which could be off. I'm just going to put my finger there. And this is where it's generally uncomfortable, especially with where I rest my thumbs, and it's where I start noticing it. If I take my finger away, you can see the heat transferred to my finger, right? So we're at 47 degrees Celsius. If I go to the same location, I can actually, you can see that nothing changed on the metal one, right? But if I go ahead and use my middle finger, which is still cool, and I go to the same location on here, let's get before and after. So you can see we're at 60 degrees Celsius, but if I put my finger here, the amount of heat that feels like it's being transferred is way, way less. But also I want to show you the plastic afterwards. When I remove my finger, you can see like that's the difference, right? Like look at the finger mark where I put it. You can see that the thermal sensor notices that it's cooler. I mean, let me do another finger just so you can see. Let me go over here. So I'll just put my finger right here where this is warm right now, but it's not uncomfortably warm. But it doesn't matter because it's such a large difference, and especially where I hold it, it hasn't been uncomfortable for long playthroughs. So I'll go ahead and you can see my finger right here. You can see that we are able to actually remove heat from it, whereas on this, on the metal one, when I put my finger down, okay, and then look at the metal afterwards, we barely have any temperature difference. And that's like the types of heat that I'm trying to convey to you guys, is that when you have when you put your finger on the plastic, it doesn't feel hot. And especially if I have my finger there, you can actually see that I remove the heat that is on the plastic and how resistant to heat it is. So this is a visual indicator of how much better the new production model of the GPD Win Mini is. And I hope that this is clear as I can possibly make it visually showing to you. Again, don't pay too much attention to how much the temperature is here. I'm going to try to find my non-contact thermometer, which actually is accurate, and see what we can get there. But this is a good visual indicator of what the difference is between the pre-production model for the new plastic model, and it's just a drastic improvement. I hope it's been made clear that at this point, I can wholly recommend the GPD Win Mini, especially now that they have the plastic midshell. It's so much better overall. Let's get into how that APU changes based on metal or plastic when we actually take a look at the temps on the die itself. Very quickly to break this down, the blue line represents the metal midshell and the yellow line represents the plastic midshell. The green and red lines are just to represent package power, and that just signifies to you that this is clearly running at a 15-watt package power. So if we take a look at the yellow line, we can clearly see that the plastic midshell is indeed a bit hotter than the metal shell, at least initially. The actual number of this is 54 degrees Celsius. Now, both of these are stock. I never replaced anything between either one of them. So what we're seeing is a stock representation of the temps that you get on these devices. But if we take a look at the blue line, while it's running initially at 52 degrees Celsius, over time, it actually does get up to the exact same temperature as the plastic model, whereas the plastic model stays exactly even right after 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, it kind of reaches its peak point and doesn't go any further. The bottom line here is that We're not looking at something that is going to be drastically reducing the lifespan of anything of the internal components, because the amount of heat that is there isn't that much. We're looking at devices that routinely can go up to 80 degrees and 90 degrees Celsius, and we're far, far below that. So this shouldn't be a worry at all from anybody. Looking at these benchmarks should give you a brief understanding of the types of frame rate that you're going to be able to get out of a lot of modern games on the GPD Win Mini, even running at a conservative 15-watt TDP. If you take a look at all of these games, all of them are at 720p. Some of the games I am running with FSR2, so they are using image reconstruction, so they are using upscaling, which means that they're running a sub-resolution of 720p, and those games would include definitely Returnal. Cyberpunk, I do not. I have 720p native on there. The Last of Us is indeed using upscaling. God of War is using upscaling, and that is it from that list. This is looking at it through the lens of 720p and a variety of different settings. The older the game gets, I'm using even larger settings. So for Deus Ex Mankind Divided, I am using Ultra settings, which is a very hard DirectX 11 game to run. There is a bunch of additional information that I put in my original GPD Win Mini video, so combining these two should give you a very clear understanding. But I was very positive on the GPD Win Mini on my original review. The biggest problem that I couldn't recommend it was the thermal problems, and I'm very pleased to report that GPD has fixed all of those with the blend of plastic that they have on here. I've been using this at length. I played Cocoon for around an hour and 20 minutes, and at no point did I feel any type of problem whatsoever. It was absolutely amazing to see how big of a giant difference. It is a night and day difference from the metal version to this new plastic version. You can be assured you're going to have a fantastic experience with the new GPD Win Mini. That's it for my review, guys. I hope this was informative. As always, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.